You ready? Okay, we're going to go. So here we are. Yuval, New York City, 2017. There's a new president in power and shockwaves rippling around the world. What on earth is happening?
I think the basic thing that happens is that we have lost our story. Humans think in stories, and we try to make sense of the world by telling stories. And for the last few decades, we had a very simple and very attractive story about what's happening in the world. And the story said that, what's happening is that the economy is being globalized, politics is being liberalized, and the combination of the two will create paradise on earth. And we just need to keep on globalizing the economy and liberalizing the political system, and everything will be wonderful. And 2016 is the moment when a very large segment, even of the Western world, stopped believing in this story. For good or bad reason, doesn't matter. People stopped believing in the story. And when you don't have a story, you don't understand what's happening.
I mean, part of you believes that that story was actually a very effective story. It worked.
To some extent, yes. I mean, according to some measurements, we are now in the best time ever for humankind. Today, for the first time in history, more people die from eating too much than from eating too little, which is an amazing achievement. Also, for the first time in history, more people die from old age than from infectious diseases. And violence is also down. For the first time in history, more people commit suicide than are killed by crime and terrorism and war put together. Statistically, you are your own worst enemy. At least from all the people in the world, you're most likely to be killed by yourself. Which is, again, very good news compared to the level of violence that we saw in previous eras. Yeah, the old 20th century political model of left versus right is now largely irrelevant, and the real divide today is between global and national, or global or local. And you see it, again, all over the world, that this is now the main struggle. We probably need completely new political models and completely new ways of thinking about politics. In essence, what you can say is that we now have global ecology, we have a global economy, but we have national politics. And this doesn't work together. This makes the political system ineffective because it has no control over the forces that shape our life. With regard to the answers, I'm far less certain. I think what we are seeing is the immediate human reaction. If something doesn't work, let's go back. And you see it all over the world, that people, almost nobody in the political system today has any future-oriented vision of where humankind is going. Almost everywhere you see retrograde vision, let's make America great again. Like it was great, I don't know, in the 50s, in the 80s, sometime, let's go back there. And you go to Russia, so 100 years after Lenin, Putin's vision for the future is basically, let's go back to the Tsarist empire. And in Israel, where I come from, the hottest political vision of the present is let's build the temple again. So let's go back 2,000 years backwards. So people are thinking, sometime in the past, we've lost it, and sometimes in the past, like you lost your way in the city, and you say, okay, let's go back to the point where I felt secure and start again. And I don't think this can work, but a lot of people, this is their gut instinct. If you go back to the First Nations, so thousands of years ago, the people who lived along the Yellow River in China, it was many, many different tribes, and they all depended on the river for survival and for prosperity, but all of them also suffered from periodical floods and periodical droughts. And no tribe could really do anything about it because each of them controlled just a tiny section of the river. And then in a long and complicated process, the tribes coalesced together to form the Chinese nation, which controlled the entire Yellow River and had the ability to bring hundreds of thousands of people together to build dams and canals and regulate the river and prevent the worst floods and droughts and raise the level of prosperity for everybody. And this worked in many places around the world. But in the 21st century, technology is changing all that in a fundamental way. We are now living, all people in the world are living alongside the same cyber river. And no single nation can regulate this river by itself. We are all living together in a single planet, which is threatened by our own actions. And if you don't have some kind of global cooperation, nationalism just is not on the right level to tackle the problems of whether it's climate change or whether it's technological disruption. All the major problems of the world today are global in essence, and they cannot be solved unless through some kind of global cooperation. It's not just climate change, which is like the most obvious example people give. I think more in terms of technological disruption. If you think about, for example, artificial intelligence, over the next 20, 30 years, pushing hundreds of millions of people out of the job market, this is a problem on a global level. It will disrupt the economy of all the countries. And similarly, if you think about, say, bioengineering and people being afraid of conducting, I don't know, genetic engineering research on humans, it won't help if just a single country let's say the US, outlaws all genetic experiments on humans. But China or North Korea continues to do it. So the US cannot solve it by itself, and very quickly the pressure on the US to do the same will be immense, because we are talking about high-risk, high-gain technologies. If somebody else is doing it, I can't allow myself to remain behind. The only way to have regulations, effective regulations on things like genetic engineering is to have global regulations. If you just have national regulations, nobody would like to stay behind. I don't know about the present, but looking to the future, it's not the Mexicans or Chinese who will take the jobs from the people in Pennsylvania. It's the robots and algorithms. So unless you plan to build a big wall on the border of California, the wall on the border with Mexico is going to be very ineffective. And I was struck when I watched the debates before the elections. I was struck that certainly Trump did not even attempt to frighten people by saying the robots will take your jobs. Now, even if it's not true, it doesn't matter. It could have extremely effective way of frightening people and galvanizing people. The robots will take your jobs. And nobody used that line. And it made me afraid, because it meant that no matter what happens in universities and laboratories, and there is already an intense debate about it, but in the mainstream political system and among the general public, people are just unaware that there could be an immense technological disruption, not in 200 years, but in 10, 20, 30 years. And we have to do something about it now, partly because most of what we teach children today in school or in college is going to be completely irrelevant to the job market of 2040, 2050. So it's not something we'll need to think about in 2040. We need to think today what to teach the young people. What we see now in the world is authority shifting away from humans to algorithms. More and more decisions about personal lives, about economic matters, about political matters is actually being taken by algorithms. If you ask the bank for a loan, chances are your fate is decided by an algorithm, not by a human being. And the general impression is that maybe Homo sapiens just lost it. The world is so complicated. There is so much data. Things are changing so fast that this thing that evolved on the African savanna tens of thousands of years ago to cope with a particular environment, a particular volume of information and data, it just can't handle the realities of the 21st century. And the only thing that may be able to handle it is big data algorithms. So no wonder that more and more authority is shifting from us to the algorithms. Yeah, I think with climate change, at first sight, it's quite surprising that there is a very close correlation between nationalism and climate change. I mean, almost always the people who deny climate change are nationalists. And at first sight, you think, why? What's the connection? Why don't you have socialists denying climate change? But then when you think about it, it's obvious. Because nationalism has no solution to climate change, if you want to be a nationalist in the 21st century, you have to deny the problem. If you accept the reality of the problem, then you must accept that, yes, there is still room in the world for patriotism, there is still room in the world for having special loyalties and obligations towards your own people, towards your own country. I don't think anybody's really thinking of abolishing that. But in order to confront climate change, we need additional loyalties and commitments to a level beyond the nation. And it should not be impossible, because people can have several layers of loyalty. You can be loyal to your family and to your community and to your nation. So why can't you be also loyal to humankind as a whole? Of course, there are occasions when it becomes difficult, what to put first, but you know, life is difficult, handle it. It starts with the body itself. The feelings that people today have of alienation and loneliness and not finding their place in the world, I would think that the chief problem is not global capitalism. The chief problem is that over the last 100 years, people have been becoming disembodied, have been distancing themselves from their body. As a hunter-gatherer or even as a peasant, to survive, you need to be constantly in touch with your body and with your senses every moment. If you go to the forest to look for mushrooms and you don't pay attention to what you hear, to what you smell, to what you taste, you're dead. So you must be very connected. In the last 100 years, people are losing their ability to be in touch with their body and their senses, to hear, to smell, to feel. More and more attention goes to screens, to what is happening elsewhere some other time. This, I think, is the deep reason for the feelings of alienation and loneliness and so forth. And therefore, part of the solution is not to bring back some mass nationalism, but also to reconnect with our own bodies. And if you're back in touch with your body, you'll feel much more at home in the world also.
Before I wrap up, I just want to say one thing to people here and to the global TED community watching online, anyone watching online. Help us with these dialogues. Like, if you believe, like we do, that we need to find a different kind of conversation, now more than ever, help us do it. You know, reach out to other people, try and have conversations with people you disagree with, understand them, pull the pieces together, and help us figure out how to take these conversations forward so that we can make a real contribution to what's happening in the world right now. I think everyone feels more alive, more concerned, more engaged with the politics of the moment. The stakes do seem quite high. So help us respond to it in a wise way. Yuval Harari, thank you.